Hey everybody, welcome to the camera department. Today, one big major announcement we got to make. Our most recent film, it's now called SASQ-WATCH. Used to be called Nigel and Oscar versus Sasquatch. Now it's called SASQ-WATCH, SASQ-WATCH. The graphics are up here somewhere. Is now available on Amazon, Google, iTunes, all over the place. If you have a chance, check it out. We would really appreciate it. Jeff and I worked really hard on that movie, as well as the entire cast and crew. We lived on top of a mountain. Crazy stories. We've shown you some of the footage in the live stream, but if you have a chance, check it out. But today on the camera department, we are going to make the case for 48 frames per second. Jeff and I shoot a ton of content at 48 pips. Why, do you ask? Well, let's go take a look. So one of the biggest things that Jeff and I do with 48 frames per second is we do a lot of commercial work with it, right? And so 48 for commercial land, I wouldn't suggest shooting a feature in it unless it was for a stylized moment, but a lot of the stuff we do for commercial land is putting those 48 frames per second images together because it gives us a little bit more control in post-production. And what I mean by that is this video here is some content we shot for a really big carpet manufacturer, and they wanted sort of this dreamy sort of vibe to it. And so what we did to do that was we sat down and kind of made sure that we could throw it up on a gimbal and shoot these kind of spatially orienting shots where it's about the environment. We wanted the camera to kind of float through. The creative director wanted the camera to kind of float through that space and be kind of dreamy, a little bit like waking up on a Sunday morning was the vibe that they were after. And so in order to accomplish that, we decided to use 48, knowing that if we did need to retime for any reason, we would have the ability to do stuff like this, which is retime these shots. So here's the before, here's the actual image itself, and you can see it's a pretty frame, gorgeously lit, very natural, airy lighting. It was just a nice kind of flow to it. We wanted to have that Pottery Barn feel. But then you can see that shot takes forever. So as a shot alone, it looks great, but in the context of the video, it was a little slow. So we were able to then do that exact same shot at 48 frames per second and suddenly draw it in. So then when we wanted moments to draw attention or to slow the piece down, we had the ability to do that accordingly by simply just going back to the 48. And it just gave us a sort of vibe that we wanted. Now that said, there's a lot of ways you can do it. Like we shot with the RED, we can do it with the Alexa, you can do it with the GH5. The GH5 has some challenges in it simply because it does shoot at 8-bit, but that's not the end of the world. We've already proven that this little workhorse of a camera can match pretty well. But one of the things we wanted to talk about is we did some extra testing and we wanted to show some stuff that was not as controlled, right? So this is maybe a little more cinema verite or handheld, not handheld, but it's a little more like on the guerrilla style, like if you're just shooting up stuff. So this first image we have is actually of me coming around the corner. This is shot at 48 frames per second. You can kind of see it just how it changes the gait of walking. And I like 48 more than 60 because 60 sometimes feels too slow, and 48 gives me a little bit better control to kind of bring it back and forth. It's just a personal preference thing, but I like how 48 still has this sort of filmic look and sometimes 60 doesn't. So I tossed the keys a couple of times. You can kind of see in that detail the slow is not too slow. It doesn't feel like they're hanging forever, and it still has a nice vibe to it. So even when I speed up my gait here towards the end, I'm walking a little bit faster. You can kind of see I get out of the frame quicker than if we were in 60. So then we come through and we do it again with a different camera, just showing the variations on it and how they kind of interpret it. This one, you know, it doesn't look as great maybe necessarily as the other one. That's not really the important part. We're really looking at the form here. And you can see again, I'm able to kind of mix this up and throw the keys up and down and do that whole vibe and get two different looks out of it. And relatively, the cameras are matchable. I didn't spend a lot of time trying to match them visually, but they are fairly matchable. And even again, the motion on it, the cadence, the snap, I tried to keep everything consistent. You can see even then, as I walk out of the frame, it works very well. Now, one of the things that a lot of people get confused on is they think that means setting the project to shoot 48 frames per second. Well, on something like the GH5 and some of the other cameras out there like it, you don't really have the ability to set the project up the way you want to. So one way of dealing with that is to is to just eat it. So you just have to eat that it's going to play back at 48. When you're shooting on something like the RED gives you the ability to set the project to 48. That means it's recording everything at 48. It's the same thing you do when you record 60 on some of these other cameras. But in this case, we're actually able to set the project up to 48. And I wanted to show you guys what happens when you drop footage shot at 48 frames per second that's maintained at 48 onto a 24p timeline. You can see that the motion cadence already is a little bit faster because there's no speed up effect here. It's just playing back as it's supposed to. And you can see this scene is pretty quick when you consider that it's not in slow motion anymore. The beats go a lot faster. The one thing to note though is there's a little bit of that shutter angle that comes in because you're dealing with that side of it. So then I took and interpreted the footage. And if you don't know how to do that, the easiest way is right click on your footage in something like Premiere, select interpret, and change it to 2396. So your 60 frames a second footage, if you interpret your footage that way, you end up getting a smoother, creamier sort of slow-mo effect as opposed to just speeding it up and down on the timeline. I personally prefer to do the modify effect and interpret the footage that way. So you can see we're back to the slow-mo. It matches almost identical to that of what we shot on the other RED when we were going in that capacity. Now, the other reason we sometimes do this is for product shots. And what I wanted to show here is maybe like if it were a close-up, what we have is we have some just keys falling into frame, and you can kind of see again from a 48 frames per second, and whichever camera this might be, but you can kind of see that there's a nice little easy flow to it. It's not moving so slow that it's boring. You can kind of see we did a lens change and mixed it up a little bit more, but you can kind of still read the details on the items themselves because again, it's not so slow that it's boring. It just has it has its own cadence. I happen to find 48 frames per second to be the perfect cadence for slow motion when it needs to just be that dreamy sort of lifestyle type content like we showed you earlier with that other stuff, that carpet stuff. Now, the other thing I wanted to show you is what happens when you speed it up. Now, we've shown some examples, but in this case, it's like a very heavy product shot. And so what we have here is just pouring some water into a glass. And so you have this first shot, it's beautiful, the light's shining really well. And then this next piece, here it is again. Now, what I want you to do is I'm going to play this again. I want you to tell me which one you think is 48 frames per second that's been sped up and what is just basically 23.976 footage. Can you tell the difference between the two? Now, obviously, there's two different cameras going on here. One's a RED, one is a GH5, but one of these is shot at 23.976. The other is shot at 48 and has been sped up 200% on the timeline. One more look. Whoops, let's set it up. One more look here. As the water fills the glass, can you tell the difference? Which one's 48 and which one is actually 23.976? And again, you're looking at it from that. And I did mix up the cameras because it was part of the process of just kind of showing off different things. And it's always fun to have more than one use to the camera. So the big takeaway for 48 frames for us is this idea that if you shoot in 48, it gives you the luxury of being able to control your timing better in post. I feel like movement, walking, feels more dreamy, it feels more lifestyle-y, especially if you have like the flares in the background. It's gonna give you that element, that kind of dreamy space that you might wanna be in for a lifestyle or product shoot even. It just sets that up much cleaner and much more effectively than, say, shooting at 60 frames or, worst case, shooting at 23 and being forced to slow something down. I just find that 48 gives you that luxury, and the blend on it looks very nice, and that's the important part. The blend of the footage looks really good when you speed it up if you need to. And again, it's 200%, so it's an even swap. So 100% is 24 frames per second. 200% is essentially 48 frames per second, but sped up, so you can gain that. So at 48, it's an easy math number versus 60, which gets into this weird spatial anomaly of like it's 253 or something. You're searching for that, and it drifts a little bit more, whereas I feel like 48 locks it in better. And I think that's a very valuable thing to consider based on what you're about to shoot. 48 provides a lot more value. Now, on something like the GH5, you're going to take a hit on the quality. On something like the RED, it doesn't really matter. Or the Alexa, it doesn't really affect you, but you just need to be mindful of it. But frankly, if you're shooting 8-bit, you're shooting 8-bit. Who cares? And just know your output, where you're going to go with it, one way or the other. If you have a chance, do that. So I'm really hoping that the new GH5S, if that ever comes out, and this video, by bringing this up, is going to date it, I hope that that camera actually has 48 frames per second in it, like true 48, like a 10-bit. That would be mind-blowing if it had the horsepower to do that. I would be so jacked because finally I could shoot things at 4096 by 2160 at 48 frames per second, and frankly, I have then essentially matched my RED to a T of where I want to be. All right, so we'd like to ask one more thing from you, and that is to check out the link below for a GoFundMe for some friends of ours. They literally, his wife just got diagnosed on a Friday with leukemia, and she was in treatment on a Monday. You know, it obviously serious in that space. So we would truly appreciate, he's a member of the Crash Show community, if you have a chance and have the ability, the funds or whatever, to maybe just check out the GoFundMe, throw $1 or $5 or $10 or whatever you got this holiday season. They're going to be away from their kids throughout the entirety of Christmas, and we really wanted to do something to bless the kids and bless the family. If you have a chance, check out the GoFundMe. It's just one of those things. He's a creative guy. So is his wife. She's a photographer. We don't blame her that she uses Canon. We like Canon. But, you know, she's an artist. He's an artist. And they just kind of got hit with something really rough. So I think it would be awesome if the community banded together to help contribute. You know, if you want to leave that you came from Craft Show, that's fine too, if that makes you happy. But, and if you don't have the ability, time, money, or energy to do that, I totally understand it. This is not a sales pitch. We're just asking literally for a friend. He's a friend of the channel. He's a friend of our family. He's important to the Craft Show community. He's a good human being, and his family is going through a really tough time. So I think one of the great parts about having a community like this is that we can rise up when someone's in need. And this is one of those opportunities for us to rise up and support someone that we all care about, whether you know him or not. It doesn't matter. We can do it as a community. That's what communities do. We stand behind each other no matter what, as long as you're not breaking a law or doing something crazy, which they didn't. That said, don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and if you want to just hang out and spend more time with us, check out the live stream on Tuesdays. It's mostly frequent. Sometimes things go wrong. I was sick last week, and we had to show the drunk episode, the infamous drunk episode. So hang out with us, and if you enjoy filmmaking and want to learn how to become a better filmmaker, maybe watch this channel. But if you want to learn how not to do it sometimes, you definitely should watch this channel. Is that right, Jeff?
Yes.
See? Jeff even says so. We're out. Oh boy, only 1 hour and 16 minutes of footage I can... Everybody knows on this channel I can talk that long. I could talk for 1 hour and 16 minutes about nothing.